Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal's Polyglot Software Development Podcast. Our guest today is Ivan Gekht. Ivan is the CEO of Gekht USA, a custom software development firm based out of North Carolina, a family-owned business with over 20 years of experience. Both owners are certified Agile coaches and support clients in Agile methods and principles. Uh, Ivan, thanks for taking the time to chat today.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you want to give a quick intro? I know I read out an
Yeah.
introduction, but in your own words, do you want to give a quick introduction to our audience, please?
So the simplest way to describe what we do as a business is we solve problem mostly using software. So basically we come in into the companies that need our help. We help them figure out what the success looks like, and then we implement custom solutions that help them to achieve their business goals. And that's why Agile is very important for us, because that's kind of the framework and the tool that allows us to efficiently do our job.
Lovely. Just to because our audience is based. I don't want to say predominantly out of the U.S., but I think the fair number of our listeners are based out of the U.S. and some in Europe. But there are folks out in South Asia and Southeast Asia as well. So if you could just also help us understand your specific role, because our conversation is going to be geared to. By the way, by way of introduction of the topic, my bad, I forgot to mention that the topic Ivan and I picked for today is business agility and its role in the modern world. So that's what we're going to be talking about for the next 45 minutes to an hour. So, Ivan, to kick off this conversation, what is you mentioned your company and what you do as a company. What is your specific role and background? Like, for instance, do you come from an engineering background?
Sure.
You're a developer. Like,
Sure.
what is it that you do? So I know when we talk about business agility,
hmm
we can talk about it in the context of your specific role in the
Yeah.
company.
Yeah, so I am Chief Executive Officer and the co-owner at GetSoft. Originally, my background, I am a rocket scientist by education. So I have a
Wow.
degree in rocket and aerospace engineering that I got back in the university in Siberia, where I grew up before moving to United States. I was in software world my entire career, over 20 years now. I started in game development, but then transitioned into software development. And in the business, I went through many roles, from doing quality assurance, being quality assurance manager, to product management, to business analysis, and ended up at the executive role. So now I'm kind of responsible for the direction that the business is going, the way we work, and the way we work with our people and our customers.
That. Thank you for that. I was just thinking at the back of my mind. You know the phrase "This is not rocket science." I don't know if
Yeah.
you are able to use that at all, unfortunately, because you are a rocket scientist. So maybe by virtue of being one negative, quote unquote, is that you couldn't say that because you've done that as well. This is
Yes,
this is
yes.
this is pretty cool. Uh,
But I mean, I can talk from experience. Like, this is rocket science. This is not rocket science.
and nobody can even disagree there. You're not a rocket
Yeah,
scientist to disagree, so
yeah.
you're in a better position already. So this is going to be a hard enough podcast, I can tell. But this is awesome. So we're going to talk about business agility, and I'll give you not so much for the audience because they've seen a lot of the podcast, but for you because we haven't worked with each other, not yet. Hopefully, we do so in the future. I'm a developer, right? I run our startup based out of the DC Metro, but at the core of it, I am a developer. That's what I am. For the last 20 some years, 24 years, I think, from my first job, that's all I've been doing. I have no other skills. I don't pretend to have any other skills. So anything I do is essentially that comes down to coding. But again, given that you run the company, sometimes you do a little bit lesser of it. But if I go for a couple of days without it, I'm just going to lose my mind, right? That's just me by way of background. And the reason I even mention that quickly is we're going to talk about agility, right? Agile. Now, before I get any deeper and share my ignorance, when we talk about business agility, Ivan, at least the topic that you had in mind, are we talking about agile software development, or is business agility different from agile software development?
It's different, and it's the same, right? So when we talk about the business agility, we talk about the ability of the organization to react or even be proactive in the modern world. right? We always can hear this term like VUCA world, VUCA, like volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, right? And what does it mean? It actually means that in the modern day, the society and the world and the technology progressing way faster than it was ever before in the history of civilization, at least known to us, right?
Right.
So we like the world between 50s and 60s, like 1950s, 1960s, didn't change as much as it changed between 2000 and 2010 or 2010 and 2020. So uh, modern organizations, they have to be a way more versatile, flexible, proactive, and literally ever changing, right? So when we talk about business agility, we are talking about the ability of the organizations to do that. So why it came from software development, right? Why agile appeared in the software development, not somewhere else, as a term at least, is because of the Moore's law and the way that the computer world was changing. It was extremely fast, right? We went from simple applications like ping pong, right, the pong
Right.
game, right, so all the way to like complex solutions with 200 lines, 200 millions lines of code, or something like that, right? Or Google now have like what, 2 trillion lines of code,
Right.
right? So the solutions became complex so fast that people needed a tool to 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 address it, right? To be able to continue working with it. And once people saw how effective it could be, they started to apply it to more than just software, right? So
Right.
that's why we're talking about business agility
Okay, so
as
at
well.
the crux of it, you know, we don't want to talk necessarily about the standard terminologies and meanings because folks can look that
Sure.
up online. But now that I have literally a rocket scientist who's in the business of agile development and software, I want to ask more specific questions, if you will. Right?
Go
Here's
ahead.
my first question: if I want to trivialize agile development, can I say something as silly as a shorter turnaround time? Is that the crux of it, a shorter turnaround time? Or like what are some of the most important facets if you have to summarize like agile in like three sentences? My starting bid is, hey, if you actually have a shorter turnaround time, that's agile. There's nothing more to agile than being able to showcase and prove something in quicker time than people were able to do so before, and all of the processes that you actually have in place and the philosophies around shortening the turnaround time. Is that the crux of agile, or is there more to agile than that?
There is more to agile than just that. I mean, shorter feedback cycles or shorter turnaround times is an important element in agility. Uh, but if we look at the origins of agile, then it's actually a scientific method applied to software development. So if that's the shortest way to define it, and that's how agile basically appeared, right? Because agile in its essence exists for thousands of years. People were using agile in a multitude of applications outside of in their regular lives, right?
Right.
Because when you're solving a very simple problem, right? So you look in your wallet and you see you have $10, right? And then you know that you want to have a dinner tonight, and you know that you want to have a dinner around 7 p.m. The process that you use to get there very often is agile, right?
Okay.
Because you do a validated hypothesis, right? So $10 should be enough to get me this, and this in the store, right? And then I have enough time to actually cook that dish, right? And so you go to the store, you buy. If the money is not enough, you adapt, you adjust, you validate your hypothesis very very early, right? So and then now the end goal becomes like, okay, so I cannot buy this, but I can buy this, so I'm gonna cook this, right? So you pivot it, and that's
Okay.
agile,
So, what is a
right? So
non-agile way of having planned an exact dinner? Just so we get, you explained You took an
So,
example, you said
so,
the
so,
agile version. What's a non-agile
so,
version of it?
so now imagine you're doing catering for a wedding, right? So you have 150 guests coming. You send out the invitation, RSVP 2 months in advance. And then people fill out and they select, like, I'm going to have a fish, I'm going to have a chicken, I'm going to have this. So all of that goes into the catering company. The catering company, up in advance, they cook, prepare everything, like the number of meals selected, the number of everything. So now, like, why people hate when unannounced guests show up at the weddings, right? Because it's
Uh,
very hard to pivot. You have the spaces, everything already predefined. You have the chairs already standing around the tables. You have all the names standing everywhere, right? That's very unagile way to do things.
So, which means that's a great example. Let me play the devil's advocate. The fact that you mentioned that an unannounced guest showing up at a wedding who did not
Yeah,
RSVP is going to actually make the host and probably other people there uncomfortable.
yeah,
So, even in 2024, where business agility is important, and we are talking about business agility, this example comes across to me as there are cases where agility actually does not help the cause. So can I in that example say that if you wanted to be agile, this dinner and this wedding would not go per plans, which means people are going to be disappointed. So is there an avenue or an area of business where
yes,
agility is actually not a good thing but a bad thing?
yes, absolutely. And we don't have to go too far to find the reason why. It's Kenavin framework. If you look it up, it's a framework that was developed by I forgot the name, by the guy from IBM, and he basically defined 4 quadrants of complexity for
Okay.
this. So we have simple or clear problems, we have complicated problems, we have complex problems, then there is a chaos, right? So
Okay.
so basically, and there is in the middle, like undecided, like I have no idea where I am, and that's the worst case scenario. But basically, agile and some of the methodologies around agile, like Scrum and everything, they all are intended to deal with complexity, with complex problems. So if you look at the simple problems or complicated problems, there are much better ways to deal with them, right? And the difference between complex and complicated is what puts a lot of people kind of like, is there a difference? And there is very clear difference. Complicated means that there are a lot of moving parts, but once you uh, study them all, you can exactly predict what's going to happen when you change something. And the best example of this is a Swiss mechanical watch, right?
Right.
You can have hundreds of gears in there, and when you look at it, it looks extremely complicated. But once you study it, you can predict exactly what's going to happen if you change that gear for 1 millimeter.
Right.
Like, so that's complicated. Complex is a situation when we cannot predict an outcome, when we cannot like take the whole and split it into parts, and then by working with the simple parts build the whole back up again and predict how it's going to behave.
So
And
does
I
that mean
think
the
the best.
difference, Ivan,
Mhm,
is
sorry.
can I say that what makes something complex is there a higher element of subjectivity making it complex when compared to complicated? Because in the case of your example of something, the watch being complicated, yes, there are a lot of moving parts, but if each of them did their job independently, they're collectively going to work fine. And there is a sense of predictability, right? And you said there wasn't as much predictability with complexity. So does that mean in your mind, the difference you see between complex and complicated is complex probably has a higher elements of subjectivity associated with it?
uh it's subjectivity to a point, or unpredictability of collaboration between two elements, right? So and the best example for complexity in this case that I can think of, right, is sports team, right? How many times have we heard stories of an all-star sports team that's built from the best players in their respective roles who lose to an underdog,
Right.
right? So how, like, if it was a complicated system, right? We take the best players, we design the best game plan, and then everything should work, right? But it's not. And at the same time, like these mega bands, right? When best musicians in the world, come together to do some concerts, like how many mega bands do you know? Can you name at least one?
Or like Metallica?
Oh, Metallica is not a mega band. Mega band is when, again, for example, you take the guitar player from Guns N' Roses, the drummer
Oh,
from
I see what you
Metallica.
mean.
Like
Okay, oh
that's the
wow, I
mega.
didn't know
Like
that. Okay.
you like you don't know they're there, but you don't really know the names because they never become as popular, even though all of these people are the best players in their respective field, right? So the best musicians in their respective field, and it still doesn't work. That's the complexity, right? So we can assume some things within the complexity, because if we cannot assume anything, it's chaos, right? It's even worse.
Right. Okay, so let me do
But
a quick recap here, right? In the
sure.
first 15 minutes, what we're talking about is what, in your words, what business agility means. But also, I think we agreed that not everything can potentially be agile. You took the example of the dinner where there is a element of planning that you have to do for something to be successful and go as planned. So when we extrapolate that and bring it back to building software, here's, for the next 15 minutes, here's what I want to ask you.
Hmm.
So if you mention agile to anybody who's in the world of software, there's many, it's a set of guidelines or principles, or call it what you will. But there are certain things that probably stand out more so than others, right? One of the first words, if you told me agile, I'm going to say sprint. I'm going to say scrum. I'm going to say grooming. I'm going to say retrospective. I'm going to say ceremonies and some of these things. Now, if you agree that those are the most, but before I ask you the question, would you agree, Ivan, that those are the common tenets or starting points, or is that not the case?
They are. They
Okay.
are the common tenet starting points of Agile.
Okay. So now let me take before I actually come to the specific question, right? In the world of software, having done this for a while, and I know you've done this for a long time as well, uh, there are terminologies that become popular, and then they dissipate and disappear. But the fundamentals of computing, the architecture changes. You have MVVM frameworks on the front end today that you didn't have a few years ago. Yes, you have microservices. You'd had them in some way or shape in the past, but things evolve and change. But I'm still not sure if the fundamentals of computing, core computing, have changed at the ground level. Meaning, I mean, ignoring generative AI for a second, if you took, the book, one of my first computer science books I had read was Cunningham and Cunningham and Ritchie, right? Hopefully, I don't, it's one of these Bible of I remember my first textbook was programming in C. Now, if you took that book today, 30 years after, 25 years later, if you try to apply that to building a React application, on the surface, I don't know if you'll find a lot of commonalities, right? Because the examples are not going to speak to building React web applications using that programming in C book from Cunningham and Ritchie. But if you took the fundamentals of computing, I think people couldn't disagree. But they taught a lot of us how to build good software. Now, over the years, I've seen terminologies come and then go. But if you were a good engineer, 100 years ago, if you read nothing about how software is being built today and someone asked you want to go build software, the school of thought I come from, now I'm not saying it's right or wrong, is that Ivan's going to build great software, even if Ivan did not read any books in the last 15 years that dealt with software development, because these terminologies come and go because there is a level of branding and marketing that needs to happen for hiring and whatnot. But that doesn't change how we build software. Now, I said a lot of words there, but the essence of what I'm trying to say there is agile. Agile's been around for a while, and there's articles about is it dead at this point or whatnot. Is it just trying to package and make something attractive, or did it really change how we did things as engineers fundamentally?
That's a wonderful question. I love it. It is a repackaging to a point. And as I mentioned, the roots of Agile are in the scientific method that has been around from what ancient Egypt and Babylonia, right? So uh, nobody is inventing anything. If you look at Kaizen methodologies, right, the Toyota production system, all of that, like revolution in manufacturing that happened
In Japan, right?
in Japan, and what actually grew into the I should have a Six Sigma book behind me, the blue one, so that grew into Six Sigma. There is so much correlation with agile that it's crazy, because in essence, again, agile is running a set of experiments, because we cannot predict exactly what we need or how we need to do it. There is a complexity, as we discussed, right? It's a process of acquiring knowledge, which is a scientific method by definition, right? It's a process of acquiring knowledge through making an observation, doing the experiment, checking the results, adaptation. And what is it? It's a Deming PDCA cycle: plan, do, check, act, right? So in essence, sprint is a PDCA cycle. We plan, we do, we check, we act on the knowledge that we acquire during the sprint. Moreover, it's two PDCA cycles. One runs around the product, the development. Another one runs around the process that we use to develop the product, right? That's why you have the retrospective and all of that in Scrum, for example, right? So it's just two PDCA cycles that run in parallel every single sprint. So if you understand how to acquire knowledge through science, then you don't need any of the great agile terms to actually run it efficiently. Moreover, it's the same with the business, actually, right? To run an efficient business, agility within the organization, you apply the same concept.
You articulated that beautifully. You said two cycles. One is the product, and the other is the process around building the product. Now, I couldn't have said it better, but I have a question for you there. I've been in projects and scenarios where, as an engineer, I want the process to help my productivity, right? I want something that helps me do things quicker, better, faster, cleaner, nicer, or like Apple's adjectives, thinner, faster, and whatnot, right? But I've seen cases where there are these processes and processes associated with Agile, in particular, because we're having a conversation about Agile, but outside of Agile as well, where it actually becomes a formality. Now you're trying to appease the process, and you forgot it's almost like losing the forest for the tree. You forgot that you're building a product, and the agile methodologies and processes should actually be flexible enough to help you do it better. And depending on what it is that you're building, these processes have to adapt a tiny bit. One of the problems I see with agile is it treats every piece of software exactly the same. Well, it's people building software. The people are similar, but even the people are different from team to team and company to company, from culture to culture, from region to region. Agile seems to be presumptive about this set of opinions that, hey, you know what? Here are the set of processes. Here are the set of rules and guidelines. Here you go. Everybody, no matter what you're building, when you're building, how you're building, and where you're building, and who you're building it for, go follow this system. That's problem number one, and I want to get your thoughts on it. But the second thing I want to ask you along the same lines is, there are a lot of these ceremonies, right? Hey, I need to have a retrospective. The sprint is like 2 weeks long. You start it on a Monday, end it on a Friday or a Wednesday and a Tuesday. You have formalities on the day you start the sprint, another set of formalities when you end it. There's midweek formalities. You have formalities in the middle of the sprint. You're then doing some grooming and yada, yada, yada. And these things never seem to end. And finally, the time you get to actually build software, instead of the 80 hours you need per week, I'm getting like 60 hours because the other 20 hours went into satisfying the system. So two things, right? I want to get your thoughts on, is the process helping the product, right? It is, or how generic it is assuming for it to be, right? In my example of the cultures and whatnot. And two is it taking too much time, right? So I should ask one after the other. Sometimes I forget, so I just throw out too many questions, but hopefully that made sense. Yeah.
It's a beautiful question, and if you don't mind, I will tie in a little bit even the previous question that you asked into
Sure.
the answer to this one, because when you were talking about the tenets of agile, right, the foundational words that everybody hear, you're absolutely right. It's like the retrospective, the sprint, the daily stand up, the backlog, the planning, the poker, and all of that kind of stuff. And that's the reason why Agile fails in so many organizations. Because the first things that should come to mind when we talk about Agile is a very simple word: goal. And that's, I think, where everything goes wrong, right? It's a difference between being agile and doing agile, and these are two different things, right? So why do you need planning? You do need planning because agile is a set of experiments that you need to run. To run an efficient experiment, you need to plan an experiment. You need to have a hypothesis, a validated hypothesis based on a theory, observation, metric, something like that, right? And then during planning session, you design that experiment. Then you start running this experiment. Do you need daily interactions like daily stand-ups? Yes, you do. Because if you don't, the feedback cycle is too long. The longer the feedback cycle, the more cost of the error, the more cost of a mistake, and the more delay you will create by, for example, somebody uh, failing to do their part of the job, right? For some reason, don't have the knowledge, don't have experience, just get stuck. People get
Right.
stuck all the time, like brain freeze. I
Right.
cannot figure out how to solve a problem when my body knows it like this, right? So we need to have these conversations. And then, do we need the demo, right? Yes, we do, because we need to check the results of our experiment. Demo is a place where we check the results of our experiment. Do we need a retrospective as an event? That's the same conversation, just same all over again. That's the place where we actually check the results of the experiment for the process, not the product. But all of that should be tied in through the core cornerstones of Agile, which first of all is a product goal. We're doing all of that not for the sake of Agile. We are doing all of that for the sake of the product that we are developing, for the goals that we need to achieve for the business that we are working for. So this kind of shifts the entire perspective into doing this all more efficiently. Because like one of the questions that you have at the if you want to get like PSM3 certification is something like, can you run the Scrum alone? If you're the only person, you're the only one on the team, can you run Scrum? Do
Is
you
that a
need to
question for
follow
me?
like no? And it's
Uh,
just like, it's something to think about for
no, no,
everyone, because
exactly.
I'm
No,
not gonna I'm not
no,
I'm
no,
not
Iman,
gonna
let me tell you, right? Whatever you just summarized there, I couldn't disagree even if somebody paid me to disagree, because you said it well. I mean, you need a hypothesis, you need a plan, you need to know if things are going well, you need a demo. The way you said it, it makes complete sense. But that's, Agile is a reflection of what you said. Yet when I agree more with your statements than with foundational agile methodologies. And here is why, going back to my question, right? Is there an element of flexibility that agile needs to come with? In other words, don't treat every project, every problem, every product, everything
yeah.
exactly the same. But I see agile doing that. Is
So
that a problem?
yes, and no. So basically, if you look beyond, for example, Scrum is a foundational framework. They actually don't prescribe you anything at all. They just give you the outline of two PDCA cycles and tell you, like, don't forget about the goal, and make sure that you have this person accountable for that, this person accountable for that, and this team accountable for that. Go do your stuff. The rest is up to the team, actually. So there are a little more complicated frameworks. For example, one that I personally love a lot is Disciplined Agile.
Okay.
It was developed by PMI, which is surprising, and it's one of the most agile frameworks you can see from the organization that's proud itself on the predictive methodology of project development. So, but it's great. They have a term that's called way of working. So basically, what they do is they define the scope of the entirety of the work that needs to get done. So basically a checklist, right? So when you develop a product, you need to do all of this. But the way you do it is up to the team. Here are some examples how you can do it, right? So you can do this, you can use this technique, you can use this process, but it's up to you. Like select the way of working that works for your team. The problem of what you are kind of talking about, it's a two sides, right? Number one, people have tunnel vision, especially people who are into the work, and some people and they're a good it's a good thing actually, the tunnel vision, because it's in different psychological studies it's called the flow, or like when your performance is increased because you focused on what you're doing, your performance increases significantly. That's just a humane reaction. The problem with the tunnel vision is you see what's in front of you. You're like a horse with the short eyes,
I was just
right?
going
You
to
see.
say that. Yeah,
So the problem when this happens is that you need some way to kind of get out of the trench, look around, and make sure that you're digging in the right direction, right? You're still digging where you need to dig, not like 90 degrees to the side, right? So that's on one side of things. On the other side of things is we have what's called oh my god, my terms are slipping away from me. The value stream, right? So the stream of creation, the value. So
okay.
when you take a big team, and for example, you have a junior developer in that team who's been with the business for 2 weeks, does he or she or they know the entirety of their value stream to make a reasonable decision within their scope of work? Not necessarily. So you need some kinds of limitations around the team to make sure that they don't decide, forget, do it intentionally or unintentionally, nobody cares, forget to do part of the work, or just don't do part of the work that is important.
Makes sense. When we are 30 minutes in, we've gotten deeper, and I
Yeah,
know the next 30 minutes we're going to get even deeper. At least that's the intent. Now, I think just to recap, we've talked about the pros and cons, if you will, and the process, the product. You mentioned the
yeah,
cycles, and you gave plenty of good examples there. Now, let's get even more specific. Let's say I'm going to imagine a scenario which is not completely
sure.
preposterous because I've been in those situations. I join a team as somebody who's done this for a while, but I don't know anything about that product necessarily. It's a new team, a new company doing a project for 6 months. Let's say that's the example. I joined the call, the Scrum call, and let's say whatever the right term is, at some point you have these poker points where you start assigning these tickets and trying to find out the difficulty in implementation. I'm asked, Krish, how many points? I mean, different people have different tools. There's no dearth of these tools. Sometimes there's a proliferation of these tools to the point that rather than me sticking out a number, I have to now go use a tool, and it takes like 20 minutes more to do that stuff. So sometimes Agile doesn't help itself in some weird cases. But let's say I'm asked to give a point. The process requires that every team member has a say, and they assign a certain point to this particular ticket. Now, when they assign the points, is it at the beginning of the conversation, or have some design work been done into the ticket or not? I've seen there's a gamut, right? You can run the gamut on how each team wants to do it. But the short of it, what I'm trying to ask here is, I must ask to assign a point, because if I don't do it, the system falls apart, because every team member is expected to have a say, new or old, and this new member who knows very little or nothing about this product or the problem is also expected to throw a number out. And I see people throw a number out because they're expected to do so. To me, it seems like a simple enough problem. Sure, there's 5 people in the team. Krish throws out a number. There's a median, there's an average. How much damage can it do? No, it can do a fair bit of damage, because it's typically, I think software projects, in my opinion, fail not because of one dramatic mistake. A web application or an API is not slow because of one major problem that people are looking to find in a query. That's not the case. It's usually death by 1,000 cuts, right? You do many things not so correctly, collectively it is a disaster. It spells into disaster. So I know I'm exaggerating some of this, but not really. Let's say I'm asked to give a point and I don't want to give a point. I've actually been in situations where someone said, Krish, what do you think this is going to take? And I'm like, I have no idea. I have no clue what this is, what the problem is, why we even have this problem to begin with. should this ticket even be there? It's like, even not to digress, but sometimes, when engineers go fix, you say, Krish, there's a performance problem in this query. I'm just taking a query with a simple example. The engineer starts, the problem with being a good engineer is you can fix the problem, but you never end up asking if the problem should be there in the first place, or if it's there for the wrong reasons. So maybe the query shouldn't even be running in the first place, but Krish happens to know how to fix queries and tune queries. So he's going merrily about tuning the query rather than asking Ivan if this query should even run, right? It's a slightly separate example, but just to convey my point. The point being, I refused to give assigned points, and it was a problem. The Scrum Master is like, no, 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 that our system's going to fall apart. You have to stick to this process. And if you're not vocal as a person, 9 out of 10 people, I promise you, and tell me if you disagree, are going to try and be amicable, right? I mean, just the nature of how humans work. Unless you're a politician, typically the rest of the humans, how we work is we try to get along, we try to be good to each other. So I'm going to be like, people are like, yeah, let me give 7 out of 10 or 4 out of 10 or 6 out of 10. I've taken a very specific example, right? A small problem, just to convey my thoughts about this. What do you, I mean, you can extrapolate this to other things in your experience. What are your 2 cents? Do you agree, disagree? What are your thoughts? Tell me what you think.
All right. So let me eat it piece by piece, right? So first of all, my favorite way of estimates for the Agile project is 3 grades. 1, TFB, NFC. Have you ever heard it?
No.
So 1 means I can do it in a day. TFB means too freaking big. It means I cannot do it in one day. And NFC means no freaking clue. That means that this item needs refinement. As simple as that, right? So, and these are the only, actually, in a properly organized product backlog, these are the only evaluations that you need. Because in theory, by the book, every PBI that you take into the sprint must be implementable fully, completely within one sprint, right? So ideally, you want to every PBI to be implementable within one day, because I'm a big proponent of daily releases, right? So you want to be able to release data. That's kind of a solution for a smaller. The bigger problem that you described is again what's in community is being called doing agile, not being agile but doing agile, and that's a common issue. Basically, what happens is people take the predictive process that they're so used to, and they start applying it, and just rename the events, right? Instead of calling it an iteration, like it's in PMBOK, right? They call it sprint. Instead of calling it so it's all the same actions that they take and with the same mindset. And that's the problem of a mindset. It's not a problem of the process. So you're absolutely right. People want to be comfortable. That's just natural. Not a lot of people who are comfortable being uncomfortable. I mean, we all look at Dave Goggins, right? And his podcast and everything, like this ex-US Navy SEAL guy who's like doing crazy things like marathons in his trunks in minus 30, and everybody looks like I could never do that, right? And I don't want to do that. I'm a creature of comfort, right? So he's the kind of a person who takes himself out of his comfort zone. Agile is about life outside your comfort zone. So the moment that people are starting to create comfort around themselves and try to run agile, that's where everything starts falling apart. And what you said, right? It's a very viable thing, right? So you come into the team, and the Scrum Master tells you, "Hey, there is a process that you will need to follow." Funny thing, every time team changes, a good Scrum Master will take the entire team, take the new member, and they will work on a new way of working agreement or working agreement. They're gonna sit down and with the new member they're gonna go through and see if they need to change anything in their processes, because the team has changed. And the reason why we want a diverse team when we work in Agile is because everybody gives their own perspective, and that's a complex system. You have the emergent knowledge, you have somebody uh, getting in a fight with somebody or something, and they disagree, they communicate, they yell, they well, maybe not start throwing things around, but I mean that's a heated discussion. But that heated discussion, that's where the truth is born, right?
Right.
So so now you have now you have a scrum master and a team which is focused around the comfort. And God forbid, and I saw the scrum masters who come and say like, "Oh no, you shouldn't be such, negative. You creating an unsafe environment for everybody, like by speaking up your mind." That's not what it should be, right?
It shouldn't be at
Because
all, right? And just to add to what you're saying there, so I think what we're saying the same thing, right? What we are saying is there is a set of processes that you have to follow, because a world without law, order, structure, and rules is going to be like a jungle, right? It's going to be absolute chaos, right? So that's a given. We need to have rules. Some of us are pretty anal about it, and personally, me, it's just that in many aspects of what I do outside of even work, you want things to happen in a certain fashion, methodically. Otherwise, it just ruffles you up, right? That's understandable. But the thing that we are saying, also saying, Ivan, is you need to take all of these rules and guidelines and be a human when you start applying those. The problem is less about agile, because if you do those types of mistakes, you could screw yourself up in many other situations outside of agile as well. But I think the problem, even though I took agile as an example, you have to understand what it is that you're building fundamentally, right? You're building software for a client or for your own business. You want to release it in a certain cycle, and you want to learn the better ways of doing things as software development starts to evolve, so you don't do it like you did it 15 years ago or 5 years ago or even 6 months ago. If it comes to JavaScript frameworks, they change like every 6 hours, right? So you constantly accommodate and make those changes. But what is important is we understand the team that we are working with, and sort of mold the process, if you will, to suit the needs of your team, as long as it doesn't wreak havoc in terms of your deliverables, right? I mean, is that, would you agree with that summary? I mean, am I saying it more or less correctly there?
mm, you know what, I would disagree with one part of your summarization,
Go for it. What is it?
and that's the adapting the process uh, for the team, right? As long as it doesn't screw up your deliverables, right? So because
You know what,
uh,
Ivan, before you continue, let me tell you some. You said it beautifully, because you said I disagree with one of the things you said, but just so the viewers know, that was the fundamental essence of what I said, which is awesome. I love it that you disagree, but I love it even more that you made it sound
so
like you actually only disagree with
yeah.
some of it. But this is great, so please keep going. So, which means
So
it was in Krish's language, it was more like, Krish, no, I do not agree with what you said at all, is what it is. But let's go for it now. Yeah,
yeah, so and there is a quote in one of the early books about Scrum. It was a quote about the importance of the deadlines. Why teams need deadlines? Why deadlines are so important in Scrum, right? Because nothing motivates people more than slowly tightening noose around their neck.
right.
That's not very people-oriented phrase, isn't it? Right.
No,
So that's my point. So, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't consider the team when we make changes throughout the team and everything. What it means is actually one of the core agile principles: build your teams around motivated professionals or motivated individuals in the agile manifesto. And I think that's important because people underestimate the importance of having a team of motivated professionals within the team to run a successful agile project, right? So because the moment we start again talking about the comfort of the team, like I'm more comfortable working this way, it improves my productivity, right? That's where without the solid instruments of protection of the system from the abuse, that's where all the hell breaks loose, right? So and I was listening to a podcast with the Netflix founder and CEO not so long ago, and he was giving an interview, and one of the things he was describing was like, yeah, we had in the Netflix, we had the unlimited vacation policy. You can take as many vacation days as you need, right? The one
You know,
thing they did
sorry,
relentlessly, uh-huh,
no,
is
sorry. I was gonna
yeah,
just interrupt to tell you that I've written a blog and I did an entire podcast on that exact topic. But
yeah,
but I just want to say it. But please continue. What were you going to
yeah.
say about unlimited vacation
It's
policy?
just, yeah, unlimited. But the only thing they did, and they did right, is they relentlessly protected the system against those who abused it. So in their minds, it was so much more important to immediately fire a person who tries to abuse that system than to create some comfortability around, because they took the motivated professionals who were not abusing the system, right? And one bad apple basically like starts to deteriorate everything
No,
around.
even actually, I'm glad you disagreed because what I said there was very much wishful thinking, right? It is not pragmatic. Now I see that because let's say Ivan and Chris join a team, we both have opinions about how a scrum should run. Let's say we have these opinions, some strong, some not so strong. Now the person managing the two of us needs to come up with a beautiful least common denominator that works well for Krish and Ivan. It's going to take 6 weeks to get to the bottom of that before we start writing a single line of code, and it's not going to scale at all, right? That's I'm not. I think what you disagreed was the correct thing, but please keep going.
So in this particular scenario, let's switch it a little bit, right? You said right. Let's imagine the situation. Me and you, the team, right? We need to figure out the way of working. So you said it's really gonna take 6 weeks of like heated discussions and everything to have this conversation. Now remove food and water from the equation. So we are enclosed in the room and we cannot leave the room and have dinner or even drink some water until we reach the agreement. How fast will we reach the agreement?
We already did.
See, let's go work. Like I
Yeah.
don't care. Like we will figure out on the way. Let's work together because we need to get out of here. And I think that I like Agile in its essence, and Scrum, for example, as a framework, they work extremely well in unfunded startups. When everybody is driven by the idea and everybody putting everything on the line because nobody is eating, right? The moment you start giving out guaranteed salaries and like the all the benefits and everything, you remove that motivation, that drive from the people, and you don't really replace it with anything, right? Because now you create the comfort for them, and once you created comfort for them, like what motivates them to go outside of the comfort zone? And
Right.
as I'm saying, like you need to go outside of the comfort zone to actually be successful at Agile.
You
That's a
know,
constant process of challenging, like in our business, right? The worst thing you can say about yourself is that you are an expert, right? Expert is a swear word in our organization, because in the modern world, expertise is no longer as valuable as it used to be, because you cannot rely on the past experiences anymore as much
never.
as you were able before,
You
right?
know,
It's a new challenge every day. So we are stupid. We treat ourselves as stupid and not knowing anything, like Danzig Kruger effect, like we're in the bottom there, like we know nothing. That's why we constantly revalidate ourselves, the processes that we are doing, the software that we are doing. We constantly revalidate our hypothesis that we are correct here, right? Because we don't trust our opinion that we are correct here, and that's very uncomfortable way of living. I can tell you that. But that's actually what drives the agile and the scientific process forward.
I think I think you said it well. what it means is you cannot customize it to anyone's whims and fancies, because everybody who joins the team, you cannot now readjust the process. I guess the fine line there is you need a process, you need a methodology, sure, but you also need to make the best use of that methodology and process in the context of whatever it is that you're building. So I think much like everything else in life, Ivan, unfortunately, things are easier said than done, right? Now you have a brilliant group of people. You don't need anything, right? You don't need GPUs. You could just use CPUs. You know what I mean? I'm taking a random example. You don't need generative AI. You don't need Copilot. You don't need any of this, and you can still build great software. But the world is not unfortunately created equal, right? And it's just the way the nature of the system, nature of the beast is. So, which is where I guess the complexities, when you have a team where somebody is smarter than somebody else, and it's just bound to be the case. Somebody's new, somebody's done this for a while. Somebody's new but knows what they're doing. Somebody's done this a long time, but actually have done it. They've done it wrong all along, so it makes it even harder. It's like saying, right? Do you have 10 years of experience, or do you have 1 year repeated 10 times? Unfortunately, a lot of people have like 1 year experience repeated 10 times, so they've not actually had the opportunity to learn 10 times as much. The person who joins the team might have just gotten out of college, but they're probably in better shape to bring some things to the table. But as to how vocal they are and how they express, what frameworks and methodologies can make you or I or anybody else change the way we were raised and brought up in the environments we grew up in, right? If Krish grew up in an environment where it was not all right to share an opinion, it doesn't matter what Agile is going to recommend or not recommend. I'm going to live by the rules of what I grew up in. You know what I mean? What I'm trying to say there is, how do you take this is slightly outside the topic of. I'm going to ask you a couple
Yeah,
more things, but outside the topic of Agile. But how do you accommodate for people's personalities, right? The problem in sometimes these principles and processes and methodologies I see in software, it's unlike code, right? Code, no matter if Ivan wrote Go code or Krish wrote Go code, if we wrote it well enough, the compiler is going to treat us exactly the same way, and it's going to run exactly the same way when you deploy that on Kubernetes and whatnot. That's the beauty of binaries, right? Zeros and ones. Unfortunately or fortunately, humans are not that way. We have our biases, preconceived notions, and all of that kind of stuff. How do we take humans and the subjectivity that we bring in the context of these rules and regulations and methodologies and make for a successful project? And the reason I ask this question is, everyone can read up what Agile is and try to accept or understand and whatnot. Everyone can take a book and read up Golang and start coding in it. Does that mean everybody who's coding to building software is doing the exact same thing? Not at all, right? But there are a lot of differences. Some come from the intellectual abilities of what we are or we are not able to do. Others come from the environments we grow up in. So I threw a lot of subjectivity in there to make your life more difficult in the 45 minutes that I'll be talking to you. How do you account for that subjectivity in the context of processes and principles that are ironed out? And what, in your experience, Ivan, has worked out very well? If you could take one example of something that's worked out very well and one example of something that has actually fallen flat for you to share this
so
experience.
absolutely. Let's start with what falls flat, right? And that's, I think, there. So in the way you talked and phrased this question, there is one core assumption that I disagree with, right? And that core assumption is that the topic that we are discussing is for every single person in the world, and it's not. It's just like every human is different, right? And every human really needs to find their place in life. That's my core kind of belief, right? So, and it doesn't mean that everybody can be a great musician. Would you agree with that?
I couldn't agree more with it, because I love music. I bought instruments. I couldn't even pull two strings together. So forget
See,
being a good musician, couldn't even be one to begin with.
so not everyone can be a great scientist. Not everyone can be a great mathematician. Not everyone can be a jet pilot, right? So just the same way, not everyone can be an agilist. It's a simple, and not everyone can be a software developer, right? Some people minds are just not built for software development. Like they don't understand the core concepts, right? They don't have an abstract thinking enough. So, and that's okay, right? Because we need these like we need people taking care of different parts. And as I mentioned, agile is only a part. It's for working with complexity. We have chaos environment, like uh that's where like everything goes wrong. Imagine, I don't know, the plane crash, and then you have the first responder on the scene. It's chaos, right? They have completely different set of rules and processes and everything that they would apply to deal with the situation. You have simple projects, clear projects that needs implemented, right? Some people really thrive in the environment that they have when they have a manager who can outline their tasks for a week and tell, like, you need to do exactly this, this, and this, and they just go and they dig in and they work on it and they excel at it, right? So the problem really starts when we take a person who excels, who like brilliant in working on, for example, complicated projects that are outlined by the business analyst and everything, and we put them in the agile environment, and we start putting pressure on them that they're not built for, right? Or they're not ready for at this particular moment of time. And that's where we get back into the concept of fixed mindset versus growth mindset, right? So my belief is that every person can get somewhere, right? Where they want to be with the hard work and everything. They can. But it's a process that takes years, and it's a very intentional process of overcoming your challenges, your everything, right? And I myself have been working on myself to avoid that fixed mindset, and wherever I encountered it, like always growth mindset, right? And it's hard, like always. It's a continuous work on yourself, right? So can people get there? Yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, what happens in the situations where you describe is that we take something and start adapting it to support people who are not ready to be in that environment. It's kind of like when you send people to space, right? How long does the preparation take? About 6 months, six to 12 months.
It's
they,
not
they
rocket
take
science. I'm just
uh,
kidding.
yeah, but they take people into these baro cameras and everything. They spin them, like they teach their bodies to survive the G's that gonna push the leg, all of that kind of stuff. So in all the honesty, like when you take agile, like a full blown, like really teal agile team, that's like radical candor working there. Everybody is very open, honest, direct. There is no politics around. Like they constantly push each other out of the comfort zones. And now imagine putting a person who has never been in the environment like that into that team. They're gonna destroy that person, right?
Ivan, basically the essence of it is, like you've said, uh, the process is fine, right? But the thing is, when people try to learn it and try to become, that becomes a career. Sometimes you just read the letter. It's like reading the letter of the law, not so much the spirit of the law, right? That to me seems like the problem, because I cannot disagree with anything, to be honest with you, with what you've said so far, because it all makes sense. Yet in my mind, why I've disagreed with certain aspects of agile is not so much for me to blame agile. It's for the person implementing it to actually not understanding the essence of what these principles are, and then adding that element of subjectivity. Now you don't have to change it dramatically or radically to suit your team members or what you're building, but you're going to have to take what is there and make some adjustments a tiny bit and figure out, hey, this is something that could work well for us, or constantly make have that evolve. And if you stop short of doing that, then things are probably going to fall apart, right? So it's less about the process itself, is more the person taking upon themselves doing it. But you also said one more thing that I want to actually ask you, and I want to take a more concrete example. You mentioned, I forget the acronyms that you use, but you said you can either get it done in one day, or this is going to take lengthier than a day,
Yeah,
or the
yeah,
third
yeah,
option, the essence was, I have no idea how long this is going to
yeah,
take, correct?
yeah,
And you said your preference was to get things done in a day, for instance. Now, I'm going to disagree there, but with a concrete example, and I'm just going to get your thoughts on this, right? Let me actually share my screen so we do a very. I don't know if you're getting to the top of the hour, Ivan. Do you have a few more minutes?
Yeah.
Or
That's okay. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
cool. And
absolutely.
just let me know when we are getting to that point. Yep. So let me go. We like maybe in another 10, 15 minutes we can wrap up. But let's say I'm going to
Okay.
share my screen here.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see this window, right? So this is one of
Yes.
our products, right? Let's say I'm just taking, we have plenty of products in
Mm-hmm.
our ecosystem. This is one of
Mm-hmm.
them. I'm going to take an example. I'm going to go because let's take an example of something we didn't do very recently, but it's not too
Mm-hmm.
far in the past either. Now, let's say we this is a project management platform you can use for n number of things, and let's say I'm designing this with you. I have to go back and look at you as well because when I go to the window I don't see. Okay. So let's say I'm going to look at let's say we are two UI engineers and we're making some design decisions and we're going to make some changes here, right? Let's take a very concrete example. Now, you mentioned doing it in a day, and I not just your example, but I've seen cases where sometimes these windows are intentionally meant to be very narrow because you can now the intent is you get things done as quickly as you can, but then don't go too far the rabbit hole, don't do things wrong so we have time to recover from it because we only have a 2 week sprint. So the intent is good that we want to do it in a day's time. But here is a pragmatic problem that I see, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Let's say we are making some changes, like we made some UI changes to this. Let me actually go into to one of these. Yeah. Let's say this is a card that it says Nvidia. Let's say I'm doing something with stocks and whatnot. I have a few icons here that have a few actions like copy, move, unlink, share, and so on and so forth. Right? There's a simple card with a few actions, and you see the behavior. We hover over that, something changes, right? You can select and deselect and whatnot. Pretty simple example. Now let's say we're making some changes to it, and we did make some changes to it because the list of actions here, we chain the list of actions, the actual actions themselves and the behavior associated with those actions. Now let's say we define this I'm going to make it very specific. Now you can create one option I've seen is you create a story, you break this down into multiple items and tickets and issues and call it what small enough so things can be done in a day's time. And then you assign those tickets to different people, maybe the same engineer or multiple UI engineers, and then they get to work. But you took in the intent, in the interest of getting this done in a single day, you actually took more time, in my opinion, to create that story and break it down so it's small enough to getting it done. Now you have to design it, implement it, test it, write all of the test code, and then get this little thing done within a day's time. Versus the other alternative is the more, I don't say non-agile way of doing this, the more product defined design, product uh, I know what the right term is, a product way of doing things, for lack of better lack of a better phrase there, where we think more as engineers and work in the interest of getting this done in the best way possible and the quickest way possible, not trying to satisfy the rules of, hey, let's get this done in one way, so let's create the tickets so they satisfy that. Let's design the buttons and the actions and the colors and the icons to suit those needs. Because I know if I articulated well as I wanted to, but I'm seeing a conflict here, if you will, in trying to get this done, making it small enough and getting it done in a way, as opposed to getting it done the best way possible as a group of engineers and as quickly as we could do, but not being bogged down by any process at all. First of all, does this
So
question make sense to you? Before
it does absolutely, and I think the response to that is you're looking on that a little bit sideways. So when I say it has to be done in a day and something like that, so can you hover back on?
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Uh,
Let me go there.
yeah,
I won't see
just
you when
hover.
I.
So
Yeah, I'm not
so
seeing you
so
when I
so
do
so
this,
there
but
is
just
a
let me know. Yep.
copy. Let's say copy function. Let's forget about the rest of the buttons, right? That's there. So the ideally the approach should be is that day one you have that card with the copy button on, fully done, covered with auto tests, covered with unit tests, fully done, fully operational. The next day you add the next button. The next day you add the next button. The next day and by the end of the 5 day sprint you have all of 5 buttons there. So when we talk about the approach, so it's not about building something like the entire feature in a day. It's not about building, some kind of separating the work. Like today we have a design, so we're gonna estimate the design. Tomorrow we have the tests that we're gonna estimate the tests, so that every step of the way had. It's about splitting the goal into such a small tasks that can be fully completed from top to bottom in one day. And then the
Perfect.
entirety of it, it can be ready in a sprint. So imagine this. So
Maybe
imagine
like,
that every
sorry to interrupt
single
you.
night,
No, I
every
want.
single night, a meteor falls onto your office, and everybody is gone, right? So you want to make sure that every single day when you leave the office, right, and your entire team go home, you have a product that is fully usable, which is a step better than it was yesterday. That's kind of the whole intention of that approach.
Completely agree, right? The only thing I would say, I don't want to make your life more difficult than I already have, is the thing where I think what Ivan says here makes complete sense, right? I'm talking in third person here just to tell the audience.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's a great summary of it. The place where there is going to be elements of subjectivity and there is no straightforward answer, like we could talk about this at length, but there is going to be elements of subjectivity, and I'm going to leave with one of that, right? Let's say I do agree that we want to take each of these actions independently and do them and not do them at once. Now you could slice it and dice it different ways. You could say that let me put all the buttons here and get them functional with nothing implemented. That could be what I accomplish on day one versus getting the copy done, right? That's left to every team and the
that's
requirements of that. But where it gets difficult, I think, or complex, not complex, sorry, complicated, or whatever the right word there is,
hmm
one is when I hit copy, this is a UI that does a number of things. Now the question is, going extrapolating that line of approach, I now have to break this page down into four tickets as well, because this has four sections, which each section having its own element of nuances and complexities, right? So I guess I don't disagree with the fundamentals of what we are chatting about here in that context. The one thing I would say is the beauty of software, much like everything else in life, is that there is a lot of subjectivity to it, despite the fact that it's being run on a machine that does not differentiate or discriminate between any of us, fortunately. Because how you break a problem down, to me, is more important than how you implement it. That's all I want to summarize there, saying sometimes people ask, hey, what is the biggest skill someone needs or you have? I tell them it's more than building software, it's how you break a problem down, right? So, Ivan, I want to get your thoughts on what do you think? I mean, if, between these two things of the complexity of writing code with or without Copilot and all the assistants we have today and problem solving, do you feel like one is more important than the other, or do you think they're kind of equally important?
Very simple. One requires creative brain function, and the other one actually doesn't. It's more of an execution function. So the brain function, at least not in the nearest future, will be replaced by AI. The execution function will be. So the answer is simple. What do you want to have a job in 10 years or not? If you do, go with the brain function, right? With the problem solving component, with something that's actual human brain. That's our competitive advantage. We can be creative, right? Generative AI cannot. It
This is such an
Yeah.
important thing to say, Ivan. So I'm going to just repeat exactly the same thing that you said, adding no value, but just to digest this myself, because I think we could have a whole other conversation about that topic. To be honest with you, because I tell people that hey, problem solving is important because for the reason you mentioned just now, there is an element of creativity associated with that. Now, the part that I where I don't know if I could even agree or disagree with you is if that could also be replaced by AI. To me, that's up to Nvidia and Jensen Huang and the GPUs to to come up with whatever the solutions are. But I think you're as we get to the close of this, it's a beautiful thing to say, which is if you want to have a job 10 years from now, or if you want to have a business 10 years from now, or if you want to make money 10 years from now, if you want to be happy 10 years from now, you're going to have to find yourself, you're going to have to get yourself out of the comfortable position that you might potentially be and make yourself uncomfortable, because personally speaking and professionally speaking, I feel extremely uncomfortable when I feel very comfortable in a workplace, because I know that I know Ivan too well. He knows me too well. We've been productive as people, which is all great. But can I survive in a world where Ivan and Krish are not exactly co-workers? Can I exist in a
Right.
system outside of this? Which is one of the main reasons I quit working for Oracle like years ago, because I got too comfortable working for a large company, and I knew within me that that is not how the world was going to be. This has been like super awesome. All of your thoughts that you've shared. As we get to the closure, Ivan, is there something I want you to have the closing comments here? But before that, do you have, I know I've thrown a bunch of questions at you and you've patiently answered them, not to mention the patience you had before we started the call, because I had to move my machine like to three different places. It's much appreciated. Do you have any questions for me that you would like to ask?
Uh, I have one comment to make, just based on the last part of the conversation before the AI part, about the systems and splitting functionality. One suggestion that I have for every single developer who encounters these issues is add one consideration, which is called total cost of ownership. So because when you start considering total cost of ownership, including like how much money it's going to take to debug it, how much money is going to take to fix a defect, how much money it's going to take to find the defect later on if I implement buttons first, functionality second. Like once you start adding all of these considerations, it will actually help you moving into the right direction, making these decisions for the business sake, not just your own comfort sake, right? So, and I think that ties into my closing argument, right? Or whatever, just close it, right? Is that when we talk about business agility, when we talk about agile, when we talk about software development, right? It's we are so focused on processes and rituals and how the best way to approach things, and these are comfortable conversations. The uncomfortable conversations are outcomes, goals, commitments, like making a promise that you will have to deliver on even if everything is going wrong. And I think we need to have more of these conversations within any business, within any team. We need to have more of these conversations with each other and holding each other accountable, uh, you know, uh, in a professional way, to make sure that we all work together to achieve something. And even the company goal can be just making money, right? And the company makes more money, we all make more money, great. But we need to be thinking about that goal every single day. And I think agile is about thinking about the goal and measuring yourself on the outcomes and not efforts. And I think this is the most important
Let me ask you
thought
one
I
last
have.
thing, Ivan. So if you have to, let's say someone's graduating from college recently or graduated recently, and it takes time to find your calling, but let's say somebody's wanting to be in the world of software development, right? We started years ago, somebody's starting today, somebody's going to start 10 years from now. People are apprehensive about many things. AI is awesome, but there's two reactions I see when I mention that word, and hopefully we can have a chat between the two of us about it at some point. Is I'm super stoked and excited. I cannot wait for it to do everything that it's promising to do and more. But the other side of that is, what, I'm scared, I'm worried, I'm concerned, and I'm anxious about it. Now that's a broad topic. I'm not trying to get into the topic, but for somebody who feels that way, who's unsure about getting into the business of building software and entering this industry, what what would you tell them? I mean, are there some words of encouragement from you to them? Hey, here is why I think you should be in this business.
I think being a skeptic, and being like very mm, aware of the dangers that AI is bringing, and being afraid means that people are afraid, and if you have the willingness to learn the foundations and go and understand things, right, then software business is for you. right? In software, we cannot be overly optimistic. I think we're all pessimists. Like everything is wrong until proven otherwise, right? Because that's the way we live our life. So I think being afraid of something we don't understand is a very natural reaction for any human being, right? So young minds, especially people who just out of the university, are very, very flexible still, very, very, they don't have a lot of that fixed mindset built up like people who are older already do, right? Who are set in their ways. So these young professionals, they just out of the university, keep on learning, just keep on learning, because that's so important in our industry. You have to learn every single day, right? Figure out the foundations, understand what AI actually is, what generative AI actually is. Look at your phone, look at the old Nokia, what the 3120 that you have with the T9, and that's kind of like the same generative AI principles. You know what? 20 years ago, this one is just way more well trained and smart and more powerful, but it's kind of the same, right? So it's not something that you have to be afraid of, but it's something that you need to understand and you need to know how to use it, because otherwise, again, people who do will be way more competitive on the job market, right?
Lovely,
So
right? Beautifully said. I'm going to share my screen so we can just show your company. I hopefully I pulled up the right site. So before we end, if you could just introduce people to your
sure,
organization, that'd be awesome. So I googled it up. Let's make sure I pulled up the right one. Tell me, is this the right one?
yes, that's us. Yes,
Okay, I'm going to include, just so before I let you speak to it, Ivan, I'm
sure.
going to include any links. I'll include a link to your company. We'll include a link to your company and your LinkedIn profile when we publish the podcast. If you need other links, just let us know, and we are happy to include that as well. With that said, we can end this with you just introducing your company to our audience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I am Chief Executive Officer here at GetSoft. We've been on the market since 1999, and for 25 years, we've been solving problems for different industries, different kind of problems. And, if you have a problem in your business and you think that in the modern world this problem should be solvable with the software, and especially if you said if you heard no from other companies, reach out. I think we can help you because we did plenty of projects that others did deemed impossible, uh,
Awesome.
and
This was,
yeah,
you know,
we have the Siberian business,
I didn't.
Siberian born
I just
business.
saw
Yeah,
that. I would have. Oh my God, this is beautiful. Uh, I'm
yeah,
gonna maybe end this with. I was gonna end it right after you spoke about the
yeah.
company, but now that I caught Siberian, and it's something that I've watched
Go
a
ahead.
lot of videos on,
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
have done a lot of reading on in my life in general. I have a lot of interest there. Um, Actually, I think I watched a movie that I can't remember the name of the movie, that somebody was actually walking their way back to India from Siberia. It was actually a movie from a while ago. Uh, Let me ask you this. One of the questions I picked some random questions to ask my guests at the top of the call
Sure.
or the end of the podcast. What is the most what is the most interesting dish? Not most interesting. What is your most favorite dish? If you could just name it and tell us what it is, and sort of educate us on what that food item is, that would be awesome. We could end the podcast with that.
Oh God, it's huh. I need to think about that for a moment because there are plenty of foods that I actually like, and my just cultural wise, my family, they in the late 18th century they moved from Germany to Siberia, actually moved, and then a few generations were growing in Siberia, and during the revolution, like the whole amount of stuff happened because of that. Some lands taken away, all of that kind of stuff. So we have such a big cultural mix in our family that some of my favorite dishes come from other countries, like potato draniki or diruni, which comes from the eastern, like Belarus and Ukraine, like same as with borsches. But I think throughout my childhood, my favorite one was potato galushki, which is basically very similar to potato gnocchi. The Italian dish,
Oh
it's
yeah,
basically mashed potato with eggs and flour rolled into thin strips, cut, and then these little pieces just boiled and served with the sour cream or butter, something like that. So I think like that was my favorite throughout the childhood for sure.
that is awesome. I was going to make the question even more difficult by asking you to name a vegetarian dish because I'm vegetarian, but I just made it a little bit easier for you and said no.
It's
But this,
close enough, right? It
yeah,
has eggs, but it's close to be vegetarian.
yeah,
So.
it's close enough. This was great, Ivan. You know what? My apologies for taking running over because this was a fantastic conversation. I knew we were going to talk agile. I was just a little bit unsure as to what we were going to talk about, but you made it easier. The nicest thing about working, collaborating, talking, and being engaged with people who are smarter than you is you don't have to do a whole lot at all. So thank you for playing that role quite easily today. And much appreciate you taking the time. I'll include all of those links. Uh, Folks, definitely check out Ivan Gekht. I did my best in pronouncing the name.
Yeah,
No, I didn't come close enough. And check out Ivan's company, and I'll include the link to Ivan's profile on the podcast
and
as well.
Krish, thank you very much. I really enjoyed today's conversation, and the questions you made it challenging one for me for sure, and I really enjoyed talking to you. Your grasp on everything that we've discussed is absolutely marvelous, and it
You're
was a
so
pleasure.
kind. You're so kind. Much
Thank you.
appreciated. Thank you.